Don't touch the. You know what? Never mind. I'm not going to spoil it. But today we've got a pretty cool malicious compliance story that we'll get into just a bit. But first, doctor put a weight limit on what you could lift? Okay then. This happened a few years ago, but I ran into an old coworker and we talked about this story. I was working at a Ford dealership in parts, and we hired a guy. We'll call him Paul. For a little bit, he was a fairly decent worker. He learned quick and was mostly doing shipping and receiving freight in the mornings and running parts to techs. I began to notice when I was working by myself on Saturdays, parts we received for stock weren't put away. He'd leave them for me to do. This was never allowed, as it was the shipping and receiving person's job to do this every morning. He started doing this during the week as well, because he knew I'd end up doing it before I left at night. Finally, I brought this up to my boss, and he had a talk about it with him. It stopped for a while, but then he began doing it again. I finally chewed him out about it because I already had a ton to do during the day, and I told him parts are just going to start piling up from now on if he doesn't do his job. I walked away after we came to an understanding, or so I thought we did. 2 days later, my boss pulls me aside and tells me Paul brought him a doctor's note this morning that stated he could no longer lift anything heavier than 10 pounds due to a back problem. My friend's boss's hands were tied, and I was ticked because I knew he did this out of pettiness. For about a week, I'd put away all the heavy parts, flustered about it, but I did it anyway. Until one night, he made a snarky remark about his lift restrictions, and it got my gears turning. If he wanted to play this game, I'd play it right back. Every day after he left, I'd go in the back and start weighing all the parts he left behind that day. If it was 10 pounds and up, I'd put it away. If it was under 10 pounds, I'd write the weight on a sticky note and leave it there for him in the morning. After a week of it, Paul started complaining to my boss about what I was doing to him, but my boss had my back. He told him I was simply going off what his restrictions were and putting away the parts that were too heavy for him. My boss also found it hilarious. A few days later, he put in his 2-week notice. Yeah, this is hilarious. This is a great way to turn a lazy, petty person's karma right back in their face. Amazing. No more what Yifs replied. I'm not quite sure how to put this delicately, but it kind of sounds like your coworker probably struggled with some pain issues that he tried to compensate for a time. Then, when pressed, got medical documentation. Then it sounds like he quit after feeling singled out for having limited capacity for certain types of work. Like, it's possible he left out all the less than 10-pound stuff because he thought it was going to be too heavy, or even carelessly without intent. Maury3205 replied, maybe, but if that's the case, isn't it better to be open with your coworker and tell them that you have some health issues stopping you from operating at 100%? I understand wanting to support the little guy, but the cynic in me assumes the worst, often correctly. Also, hey everybody, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these malicious compliance videos, it would be so nice, so awesome if you like the video. Comment it down below if you're listening to our podcast. Now then, our next story is, you need to message me when finished with a client before going to the next one. As you wish. A few years ago, I worked as a tech support guy / salesperson at a small, family-owned computer store in my hometown. It wasn't a franchise, just a local shop. The owner? A mustached, arrogant dude who could never admit when he was wrong. No matter what went wrong, it was always someone else's fault. That constant blame game was a big reason why I ended up quitting, but that's another story. At the time, my main job was delivering products to clients and doing on-site tech support at their homes or businesses. Now, for some context, my boss was obsessed with the idea that I was too slow during client visits. No matter how long I actually took, be it 5 minutes or 2 hours, it was always too much in his eyes. He couldn't seem to understand that tech problems vary and can take different amounts of time to fix. And of course, he loved to compare us to past employees. Back when so-and-so worked here, he was way faster than you. Funny thing is, I knew that when so-and-so worked there, the boss used to say he was slow and someone else was better. That was just his thing, guilt-tripping whoever was working for him at the time. Fast forward a bit. One day, he was in an extra bad mood and decided that from now on, I should message him every single time I finished with a client and wait for his reply before moving on. Same thing when I arrived somewhere. Message him to say I'd arrived. He wanted this done through WhatsApp, SMS, or even a phone call. If I didn't have credit, I was supposed to make a collect call, where the person receiving the call pays. Not sure how common that is elsewhere. Basically, he didn't trust that I was working and thought I might be wasting time between clients or just riding around town. Spoiler, there's not much to see. I was annoyed, but sure, whatever. Rules are rules. Day 1. I followed the rule to the letter. Arrived at a client? Message. Finish the job, message, and wait. I lost way more time waiting for responses than I ever did between jobs, but okay. Day 2. Same deal. Morning went by. After lunch, I loaded up the bike with deliveries and gear and headed out. First client of the afternoon messaged when I arrived. He replied, fix the issue. It didn't even take 30 minutes, so I messaged when finished. No response. Waited 5 minutes. Nothing. Called him. No answer. Waited another 5 minutes. Still nothing. So I sat down on the curb under a tree and waited. Watched some videos, scrolled through Facebook, chatted with friends, and I waited and waited. Almost 3 hours passed. I just sat there doing nothing, waiting on the guy who demanded that I never move on without his go-ahead. Eventually, my phone rang. Boss goes, "Where are you?" And I say, "Still at client X's place." Boss says, "Still? He was the first one this afternoon. The day's almost over. Just go back here." And I go, "On my way back now." I got back to the store and was greeted by him practically foaming at the mouth. "Why the heck did you take so long? You're so slow." I looked him straight in the eye. "I was following your rule. You told me to notify you every time I finished a client and wait for your reply before moving on. You didn't respond, so I waited. I'd never go against your orders." He froze, just stared at me. He didn't know what to say. Then he tried to backpedal. "Well, you should use common sense. If I didn't answer, it's because I was busy." Turns out he'd spent the whole afternoon dealing with contractors and problems at his house renovation and just completely forgot he'd given me that rule. Needless to say, that rule was never mentioned again. I went back to the old way of doing things, but of course, he still kept complaining that I took too long with clients. Some things never change. Yeah, if you're gonna take quote-unquote too long to do a project, might as well stretch it out all freaking day, right? And hey, you're doing exactly what the boss man wanted, so I don't see a problem here. Great Mal C. Love it. Brainwave CC replied, "Early in my career, I had a boss that thought I was taking too long to migrate users to new computers. We were doing a department-wide migration, 100+ users, of all staff to new computers, and we used the following process. Build new staff desktop. Back up the data from current machine, then apply it to new one. Get the staff to stop working, lunch or a meeting, then perform the final backup. Replace the old computer with new computer and restore last of the data. The first 2 steps were conducted at my leisure, but steps 3 and 4 were what we had to do to swap them out on whatever day they were being migrated. I could do that bit in about 75 to 90 minutes per user, so roughly 2 hours per user with overhead, which means 3 to 4 users migrated per workday, depending on any other responsibilities. Occasionally, I could do 5, if I could maximize concurrency of migrating 2 members of the same team working in the same area, but mostly I tried not to take out whole teams at once. My boss was sure that it could be done faster. "I can't see why it takes more than an hour," he said. He passive-aggressively nagged me about this for about 3 weeks as I was upgrading the department's users. One day, he suffered hardware failure and decided that he was going to build out a new machine and restore all his data. So, in fairness, this included step 1, but not step 2. Since we had a full tape backup system that ran every night, his attempt at building a new machine for himself took half a day, but he didn't set it up correctly to be able to do the full restore from tape. When he escalated to me, I told him he'd have to do the initial build again, but with some differences, so he did that. Whole day gone. Now he went to do the restore. It was from tape rather than disk to disk as I did for our staff, and the solution we used was optimized for backups, not restore. The restore took 20 hours, so another whole business day gone. Then he spent the rest of the day tweaking his system to get back some of the configuration that wasn't reflected in a useful way in the backups. Rest of the day gone. Machine failure on Monday, rebuild on Tuesday, ×2, with backup started Tuesday evening and finishing late Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday, he was mostly operational, although he spent some time asking me questions about what exactly was part of the backup process and where exactly did each app store its files. But never again did he question me migrating 3 to 4 users per day. Our next story is, I won't touch your stuff, even to help you. Growing up, my younger brother was obsessed with his privacy. Totally fair, except he took it to an extreme and was rude about it. He used to yell at me for even walking near his things. One day, I tried to grab his phone to hand it to him because it was ringing right next to me. He snatched it out of my hand and shouted, "Stop touching my stuff! Never touch anything that's mine! Ever!" All right, message received. Sometime later, he left his laptop on the edge of the table, charger stretched across the floor. I noticed it was going to fall and crash. I reached out to move it and then remembered his rule, so I didn't touch it. About 30 seconds later, he walked by, tripped over his own charger, and the laptop crashed to the floor. He lost his mind. "Why didn't you move it?" he asked me. "You told me never to touch your stuff," I reminded him. He was furious. My parents backed me up. Rule's a rule. Guess who stopped making blanket demands after that? Perfect encapsulation of malicious compliance. Really nothing else to be said. This was very satisfying to read, short and sweet. MemeMG replied, "Rule or no rule, who yells at someone else when it's their own laptop that they placed on the edge and they're the one who tripped on the cord?" And Contraintier commented, "People who don't have the spine to take responsibility for their own mistakes, but also are ticked that they can't realistically blame the other person in the room, so they go ape crap over it." Our next story is, you must use the company car. I used to work for a small regional sales company where part of my job involved visiting clients across the state. I had my own reliable car, kept in great condition, and I always preferred using it for work trips. More comfortable, better mileage, plus I knew it inside and out. Well, one day the new manager came in with a bunch of new rules, one of them being that all employees must use the company car for any work-related travel. No exceptions. I explained that I preferred my car and even offered to waive the mileage reimbursement, but nope, policy is policy. Next time I was to travel for work, I grabbed the keys to the company car, a crusty old Ford Focus with 170k miles, held together by zip ties and corporate optimism. Barely any AC, brakes squealed like a banshee, and it reeked of stale coffee and despair. About an hour into my 3-hour drive to a client, I hear a loud clunk, then smoke. Then the car just dies on a remote highway. No signal. I end up walking nearly 2 miles to get a bar of service and call for a tow. Client meeting? Missed. The company had to reschedule, reimburse the client for the inconvenience, and cover the tow and repairs. Manager wasn't pleased. I reminded him that I'd offered to take my own car because I trusted it. After that, the mandatory company car rule got quietly retired, and I never heard about it again. So this is one of those where, I understand why the policy's in place, probably for insurance and liability purposes, but you've gotta hook your employees up with something more than just an old rust bucket that's about to blow at any given moment. Can we get a car that was built this century, please? PV2B replied, "I hope you do still get reimbursed for the use of your own car, though. Otherwise, you're just literally letting your employer use your car for free." Remote Presentation 6 replied, "Worse than that, the gas and wear and tear on the car will cost you significant money over time. Without mileage reimbursement, you're subsidizing the company." Our next story is, "Don't think anyone will care what I think and advise me to leave a negative review?" Awesome! Let's see what happens. This is a long one, but I still enjoy it. Long ago, I was dumb enough to rent a house within the control of an HOA. I've since learned better. This property was managed by a company called, city I lived in, Properties, and they had purchased the house within the HOA and rented to us. But given that I wasn't actually in the HOA, I was just a renter, it became a really convoluted mess very quickly. We were told that we would need to adhere to the HOA guidelines, but we couldn't talk to the HOA directly, nor would we be able to receive a copy of the rules, but that it wasn't that serious. Most of their tenants didn't ever hear from them. Should have said no right then, but I was young and dumb. The day I arrived at the property to move my stuff in, I was informed by my landlord that I was being fined $100 for my trash cans being visible from the street. Apparently, because my trash can was delivered by my city 2 days prior to a place I didn't have access to, it was my responsibility to have driven across town and broken into the backyard to move the trash cans. The first infraction is a warning. They never passed on the second, is $100. They said I was responsible for it, especially after the warning I literally never received. Then they told me that they would only accept payment in person going forward, even though my deposit and first month's rent were paid online, and it must be through a money order in person. Then they informed me the office for, city I lived in, Properties, which I'd never been to, is actually a 2-hour drive away, totally not in the city I lived in. I told them this my first day in. I got the keys an hour ago, and there's no way I could have done this correctly. Surely it could be explained to the HOA that this couldn't be my fault. They said no, I couldn't talk to the HOA because I wasn't a member. Couldn't see the rules I was supposed to follow because the HOA only allows copies for members. Then they pointed me to a single line in the rental agreement that said I would follow the rules. After far more back and forth than should be required for something so ridiculous, we came to an agreement that they would cover the fine, but for some reason it was impossible to waive the record of the infractions, and I would be halfway to eviction on day one. All of it counted against me, but they'd do the $100. I asked if there were any more rules that I need to be aware of up front since I couldn't get a copy of the rules. They told me I had to mow every Thursday because that and the trash can thing is what typically gets people in trouble. They do a walk-by on Fridays. If we mowed on Wednesday, it would be too long by then. If we did it on Friday, they'd count it as not done. I mow the lawn every Thursday for months and kept my head down. I never even spoke to a neighbor or did anything to draw attention to myself. Around 3/4 of the way through the lease, I get a $400 fine on a Friday with a photo taken in nearly my backyard of my grass with a ruler next to it, which I had just mowed the day before. I had missed a single tuft of grass behind the AC unit. It was less than half an inch above the rest of it, and they'd walk through the yard to the back corner with a ruler to find an issue. They said this puts me on my final warning before eviction, unless I could prove it was cut by a specific landscaping company owned by someone in the HOA. Apparently, the HOA only accepts work from them, and it's the only way to reverse a fine. I fought it hard, but ultimately I paid it because I was almost out. Then I started to pay to have it done by that company and kept receipts just in case. Around 2 months or so left in the lease, I get another notice. This time, it's a $600 fine and a formal letter stating that I would be evicted and a picture of my grass fully mowed. No ruler, no indication that anything was really wrong, just a wide shot of my house with cut grass. Since the last time I was told that a receipt proving it was done by them could clear it up, I called the landlord up and offered to show them the copy of the receipt, told them to look at this picture or come by with a ruler, but it was done correctly. I figured it was a misunderstanding, and there's no way I'm actually getting evicted over this. A woman I'd never spoken with answers the phone and comes in hot from the get-go. I calmly explain the situation to her. She isn't having any of it and cuts me off mid-sentence, says I have to pay the $600 today, then they're going to evict me. Refuse to look at the receipt or the photo, tells me the buck stopped there and that it's my fault for being a bad tenant and to just save my breath and start packing. I told her I didn't recognize her voice and that I'd been dealing with someone else. I asked how long she'd been there. 2 days. I just started. I asked to speak to someone else who might be more experienced. There's nobody else. We don't need to continue any further than you giving me my money. I started to say, I think I need to speak to someone else again. Nobody else works here and no one cares what you think. Stop trying to get out of it and be a man. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but now it was the principle of the thing. I was like, I'm pretty sure someone cares what I think, and I know they didn't just hire you and leave you alone in the office. Then go write your opinion on Google or something, where we can all go back to ignoring you. If you call back, you're only ever going to talk to me because this isn't worth anyone else's time. I said, oh, don't worry, I'll get right on that, and I promise you're going to care in the end. Then this woman started listing off review websites saying that they don't care and no one cares about me. Go to Yelp, go to this place, because no one cares. I wrote them all down, asked for her name, she gave that too, and I wrote that down. Then I told her I'd be in touch. Cue the malicious compliance. This was early in the morning and I had to go to work, but it was an office job that allowed me some leeway in when my work could be done, as long as all of it got done before the end of the week. I cleared my whole day. I didn't get a single other thing done. I found every online site that even halfway mentioned them, and I wrote an entire scathing review in every one of them. Not just copy and paste, but fully hashed out in every single place, fresh. I even contacted the local news organization, though they never got back to me, but the attempt was made. I ripped them a new one in every method I could. Their website, Yelp, Google, Zillow, every single place that had a message box. I was doing it in bed up to the point I passed out late that night. Most of these places had no reviews or one 5-star review, so it definitely didn't go unnoticed. 8 a.m., I get a call from the VP of the property company. She'd flown in from Florida, where she was on vacation, to figure out why they suddenly had all these super negative, super specific reviews. I said, "Oh, there's somebody else who works there?" The VP tells me that she's read the reviews and that she's sorry this was my experience, that this was liable or whatever since I wrote it in a public place, and that they'd sue. I told her it's not liable if that's a true account of my experience, which it was. I added that her new employee even told me the places I could write my opinion because no one was ever going to care what I said. I was just following instructions. They were also evicting me based on something that was demonstrably false, so it's not like I had anything to lose. She got really quiet, then puffs herself up and started getting an attitude. Says I'd be hearing from her lawyers soon. I said, "Oh, great. Were they on vacation too?" She hung up. I think it was an hour or two later, I get another call from the president of the property company this time. They looked at my receipt for the lawn care and looked at the photo and saw that it was very obviously wrong and were dropping the charge. We were not going to be evicted. Not only that, but they'd straightened it out with the HOA, and the first 2 infractions were also dropped. My $400 infraction was actually only a warning as a first infraction, so I'd be getting that money back. And to top it all off, the wretched woman who told me that no one would ever care what I think was fired by him personally before the call, which is what took an hour or two. Apparently, she was in tears. They asked if I could take down or at least revise some of my reviews so it didn't ruin their company's reputation. I left them all up even after I moved out and never answered another call from them again. Someone's dog may or may not have also taken a dump underneath their doormat and accidentally stomped on it after a 2-hour drive to drop off the last money order. Impossible to tell, really, but who cares anyway? Okay, even if the truthfulness of this story is like 70-30 ratio, truth versus fabrication, what a banger. That was a great story. I think there might have been some embellishment, though. Wooden number 6102 replied, "We've been incredibly lucky. When the Hubs found this great little place, he failed to mention the HOA. Given the horror stories we had read, I was faced with the conundrum of whether to divorce or murder. Turned out neither was necessary. Our HOA, rather than being a malignant dictatorship, is more the please don't let your chickens roam the neighborhood variety. Like I said, we're lucky, and after reading this most excellent account, really lucky." Our next story is, don't be on your phone while on the clock. This happened a while ago, but it's my favorite and most genius malicious compliance I've committed. I was working for a Siteworks excavation company as a laborer on a pipe crew. I'm not a phone at work kind of guy. I don't like texting all day while at work, and I'm not that involved in social media, so all I would use it for is to pull it out of my pocket to really quickly check the time. Foreman I was working with said I can't be on my phone while on the clock. I told him I'm not on my phone, I'm just looking at the time. He responded that if I wanted to look at the time to get a watch. Okay. I went to like 5 pawn shops until I saw a relatively cheap pocket watch and bought the crap out of it. Next workday, I overly exaggerated my efforts to look at the time, making it look like I was trying to hide phone use. Of course, my foreman jumped right down my throat. "I told you no phone, even to check the time." "It's not my phone if it's my new pocket watch," I said with a crap-eating grin. He seethed as he walked away. Never bothered me about anything else, and I went back to my usual crew shortly after, and it was no longer an issue. Beard Farkland commented, "This reminds me of the guy who decorated cookies to look like iPhones. He was holding one in his car and got pulled over by a cop. He rolls down the window and takes a bite. Then they realize he's got a warrant for unpaid parking tickets, and they take him in." Our next story is, you didn't need my help. One of the offices I work for is moving to a new location. I started at this location, worked at it for 4 years until I was transferred to a closer office. Since they're officially moving next week, they've been packing things up through the week to carry 5 miles away over to their new office, and I've repeatedly offered to help. Yesterday, I made suggestions about helping, offering my truck to carry things, go grab boxes, etc. Every time, I was turned down, and the supervisor finally said, "Look, we need you to sit there and deal with patients. We don't need your help with the packing. We have this." Cool. I turned around, did my work, completely ignored issues they were having. They needed another set of hands a few times and would call my name, but I was suddenly busy with the patient or the phone or whatever else was needed. When they asked about packing some items in particular, I shrugged with no answer. Finally, the supervisor asked if I was going to help with anything. I answered, "Nope, I'm going to sit here and deal with the patients like I was told. As you said, you don't need my help." Today, guess who showed up with a sore back and hobbling? Yeah, I don't know why you would turn down someone that's actually working hard and offering to help. I guess you get what you get. Faye Trogue commented, "In larger companies than yours, we were actually forbidden to do the actual moving of boxes. We packed and unpacked boxes, but all the moving was done by actual movers. I presume due to worry about workers' comp and generally people getting hurt." New Boss Jerome replied, "At one place I worked, union rules also came into effect. The informal standard was, if you can carry it one-handed, you're okay. If you were moving to another building, you could pack everything up and wait up to 3 days. Or you could use twice as many boxes and do it yourself. PC moves were a different department with the next day SLA. Our next story is, don't touch the DeWalt. Going back through the mists of time to the days of working with my father-in-law as a builder's laborer for this little story. To start this, my Phil/boss had a habit of going to a B&Q for insert random non-critical item, when in actual fact it was a handy excuse to go to a cafe for a sausage and bacon sarnie while the rest of us got on with the work. He had one golden rule. All other tools were whatever, but his precious DeWalt drill was his baby. Never, ever, ever touch the DeWalt. This fine morning, he decided to toddle off, leaving me, the plumber, and the plasterer to our various jobs. My task was to sort out the architrave and hang a door. After getting the hang of builder's banter while being a gasp girl, give as good as you get, and you're sorted, I thought I'd sort out the cheeky booger. You see, don't touch the DeWalt, the only drill in the building. Fine, suits me. Phil waltzes in. Suspicious stains on his shirt and what looked to be ketchup in the corner of his mouth. Why the heck isn't the door done? Well, I did what I could, but you said I wasn't to use the DeWalt. He spluttered a fair bit. The plasterer fell off the steps from peeing himself laughing. Plumber quietly giggled, and I stood there pulling the most angelic face I could manage. And then I was finally given permission to use the dang drill. Once again, I don't think people think before they speak sometimes, and it's just a power move. You got to be that authority person to drop the hammer. Well, that's what you get. Tremanda Karucha commented, "That's brilliant. Sounds like the classic case of boss logic. Stick to the rules until they're inconvenient. Then suddenly you're the hero for defying them. Well done on keeping calm and not letting the DeWalt drama derail your day." And OP replied to this, "I got my point across. I actually sort of miss those days. I paid my dues, showed my worth, and most definitely didn't get relegated to being the tea and coffee maker, though they tried. The lads actually forgot I was a girl eventually. I remember we were sat having breakfast in the local cafe before starting work, and the plumber was sat across and just kept staring at me. I was like, 'What?' And he goes, Have you got earrings on?" "Yes, Dean, I do. Girls do that sometimes." Our next story is, stupid bank scenario. Went to the bank today to cash a $500 check made out to my wife, Rebecca. Bank teller asked me if I was Rebecca. I said no, I'm her husband. She said I couldn't cash a check made out to someone else. Rebecca had already signed the check. I asked if I could just deposit it. Bank teller said yes. I deposit the check. Then I withdraw $500 in cash. Not sure if she figured it out. AK Lone Wolf replied, "The answer is actually really easy. You have a joint account. You can deposit a check to the account with someone's name, but you cannot cash said check. You're authorized to withdraw from the account. It's two separate processes that have radically different consequences." White Ranger 27 replied, "This, OP is just frustrated and thinks the teller is stupid when they're just following protocol and regulations. Being someone's spouse doesn't give you financial power of attorney, and a signed check isn't an automatic green flag that you're good to cash it. Tellers have the ability to deny any check at any time." Our next story is, stuck to the script. So I did, word for word. I, 18-year-old female, worked at a call center for about 3 months, mostly helping people reset passwords and answer basic questions. During training, they told us to, quote, sound natural and conversational. Cool. I did that and got great feedback from callers. Then we got a new supervisor who flipped if we didn't read the script exactly as written. She said, if you deviate even slightly, you'll be written up. Okay. Next call, a guy says, hey, my account's locked. Can you help me real quick? I respond, robot mode. Hello, thank you for calling. My name is blank, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. How may I assist you with your technical concern today? He paused and said, are you serious? I kept going exactly word for word. Even the weird fake empathy lines like, I completely understand how frustrating this unique situation must feel. Mid-call, my supervisor walked by and actually stopped to listen. She tilted her head, looked confused, and asked after the call, why were you talking like that? I just said, you told me to stick to the script. She didn't have a comeback, and funnily enough, the next day, she told our team, okay, let's make sure you cover the key points. You can be natural again. Yeah, sticking to a script this rigid is almost as bad as using AI for these conversations. Almost as bad. Regina Spector's VJ replied, I hate those stupid empathy lines in the script. I once had to call roadside assistance because my company truck was stuck in the mud, and the guy was like, I understand that it's very frustrating to be stuck in mud. Like, yeah, cool, buddy. I need a winch truck, not a therapist. False Disaster 1254 replied, the doctor's office. I understand it's frustrating that we haven't done your medicine. Ever been through withdrawal on antipsychotics? No? There's no way to explain to you how much this is going to suck and what state I'm going to be in when I walk back in here at exactly 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't tell me you bloody understand. Our next story is, I have to teach in my classroom? Bet. I first started teaching over 20 years ago at a high school, so this was roughly May of 2004. As a new teacher, I was the low man on the pole and ended up in a portable classroom instead of the main building. If you don't know, it's what it sounds like. Kind of like a small mobile home trailer. They're meant to be used temporarily at best, for overcrowding or emergencies and the like. The big problem is that Florida is hot as heck. We have 2 seasons, summer and hot summer. This particular year, our AC in the portable couldn't keep up. The insulation in the building had been damaged in a hurricane the previous year and had not been repaired yet. As a result of those 2 things, it was hotter inside the portable than it was outside in the shade with the breeze. So I said, freak it, and moved class outside and taught math in the courtyard for a few days. One of the assistant principals saw us and asked to see me later. He asked why I was teaching outside, and I explained. Teach in your classroom. I tried to negotiate. What if the front office has my cell number? What about the media center? Can I teach there? Teach in your assigned classroom. Bet. That weekend, I went to the home improvement store. I bought a 50-gallon trash can, a large standing fan, a small pump, and some copper tubing. I rigged it up so that the chilled water would be pulled through the tubing that was zip-tied to the front of the fan. Then, Monday, I went to work early and got a bunch of ice from the cafeteria to put in the trash can. I filled the cooler with water and dumped that in there with the ice. I now had enough ice water to make cool air. When the kids showed up for first period, we had some air. It wasn't as good as a real air conditioner, but it helped. The kids thought I was a mad scientist, and that actually made me think about switching subjects to science later. No, kids, I'm not a mad scientist, just basic thermodynamics here. By third period, kids are telling each other about it. We went that way for about a week and a half before it ended. I got called into the office. Why am I getting phone calls from parents about some science experiment in your math class, Mr. Cobb? It seems some of the kids had been talking about my DIY solution at home. It's a homemade air conditioner. I told you ours was crappy. You didn't want to address the situation, so I did. I was told to disassemble it, and by some miracle, I had a newer AC unit in my portable the next day. The principal was ticked I, quote, made the school look bad, and she non-renewed my contract at the end of the year, so I had to find a new school. My son goes to that high school now. Those same portables are still in use. You know, I wouldn't even consider this malicious compliance. OP's just a good teacher trying to look out for the safety and welfare of their students. I mean, if it's hot and the AC is out and you're in Florida, totally understand why you wouldn't want to be inside. Like, what kid is going to be focused on the lesson when they're just trying to survive that brutal Florida heat? Crazy, crazy story. CrimeDoc14 replied, I taught in a portable, also in Florida, one year. When talking to an administrator one day, I happened to mention that I was teaching in a portable. I was told that I was not. I was teaching in a mobile modular unit. We did not have portables. Better living through nomenclature. Our next story is, video attendance is required. We're still mostly remote at work, with more and more of the coordination done over chat. Meetings are mostly audio and shared screen. One unpopular program manager has begun to make it a point to ask everyone to turn cameras on for better communication. He called me out today, and I discovered a lovely bit of maliciousness. I turned my camera on, and we immediately discovered why TV announcers dress simply. I was wearing a golf polo with fine horizontal stripes. Every time I moved, a more pattern danced across the screen. It was the most obnoxious, attention-grabbing thing I've ever heard. Cue 5 minutes of razzing me about my shirt. I spent the rest of the meeting fidgeting in my chair. I can't wait for next week's meeting. I have several more shirts with similar patterns. And these, friends, are the hazards of mandating cameras being on during Zoom meetings. Just saying, you get what you get. Just Autre Waterbender commented, "A person in our company maliciously complies by using one of the animal head options. They didn't say you had to show your own face, just that you had to have your camera on. He chooses a different animal every week. I love it." Our next story is, "Fine, I won't touch anything in the kitchen." So, my 13-year-old daughter recently got super into baking cupcakes, cookies, banana bread, you name it. She was doing great, but she does tend to leave a little chaos behind. Flour on the counter, spoon in the sink, oven mitts everywhere. One day, after cleaning up yet another post-cookie explosion, I snapped a bit and said, "If you can't clean up properly, then just don't touch anything in the kitchen at all." She nodded. Okay. The next week, I came home from work to silence. No sweet smells, no baking music from the kitchen. I figured she took it seriously. Then it hit me. The dishwasher, still full. The garbage, overflowing. The sink, piled with dishes. The groceries I asked her to unpack, still sitting in bags. I asked what was going on, and she goes, "You said don't touch anything in the kitchen, remember?" So I didn't. Touché. We renegotiated the rule now. It's you can bake if you clean like a pro. She agreed. I got cookies. She got victory. Fair trade. I always love these malicious compliance stories that involve the children flipping it back on their parents, literally from, just the youngest of ages. The sass is always there, right underneath the surface. This one's actually kind of funny. T. Griggs, 1978, replied, "I feel the pain. My daughter, 20 now, still loves to bake. We had the same issues with a mess being left. Once, she was 15 or 16 at the time, I decided to just leave it as is and went for a weekend visit with friends. She super cleaned and never left another baking mess." Our next story is, "Hallways had lanes for students to get them to class faster." I was a teacher at a middle school in 2014 to 2015 that was Title I school, extremely low income and test scores. The state government actually removed all administration staff 2 years prior for the whole district as the student outcomes were so low. The new admin came in with a micromanagement authoritarian directive to improve test scores. One of their brightest ideas was to put lanes in the hallways to manage flow and get students to classes faster. There were 3 lanes, 2 one-ways along the walls, and a middle teacher-only lane. Within about 3 days, all the students were driving imaginary cars. They orderly followed one another, would let people in to merge, use turn signals, and generally was pretty fun for a few days. The teachers would direct students at intersections and played along for a bit. The flow did slow down, though, as students wouldn't pass each other and would have trouble merging into traffic around doorways. Another thing taking time was the students parking their imaginary vehicles outside the classroom. They would spend time backing them into spaces or have trouble parallel parking. The admin didn't like this and really started getting angry at the staff and students as so many kids were still tardy to class. They actively were handing out detentions and pretty angry at staff for playing along. This really triggered the students to start getting malicious. The students couldn't cross the middle lane, so they would have to walk down long hallways and make U-turns to see their friends or get to their lockers and classrooms. They started cruising the long hallways with their tricked-out imaginary lowriders. They would have shock noises even. Some of the really popular kids started a bus system where they had a schedule to pick up other students and deliver them to other classes. They would hold shoulders and move as a block. Sometimes the bus broke down at an intersection and blocked traffic for everyone. Drag racing started where they held up traffic and raced down the hallways. Police would pull people over and write tickets. The most annoying part was students needing to leave the classroom to check on their cars to make sure no one stole it. Sometimes a student would come back from the classroom and ask if anyone was driving a type of car as it was being towed. the disruptions in class started to get really out of control. Admin thought it was going to be a phase and students would get bored. The best part about school for the students turned out to be the time in between classes. Everyone was tardy constantly. Eventually, the lanes, tape, were ripped up and they had shortened the passing period time by 2 minutes, so students had to rush to class and couldn't spend any time in the hallways. The cars slowly died out, and a new fad was needing to use the restroom during class time because the passing period was like 3 minutes long and not enough toilets to satisfy all the students legitimately. Students were written up for needing to use the bathroom, so kids just started clogging toilets and peeing wherever. Other car things: flat tires, emergency sirens, car accidents, GPS problems, no gas, lost license, couldn't find keys, stole other kids' cars, repo cars, and towing cars. Yeah, this is just imagination gone wild, and I love it, I'm here for it, that's what the admins get. White Particle replied, "Whoa, this was an incredible success story that the administration was too blind to see. Massively missed opportunity to lean into what the students were doing and set up student traffic engineers, urban planners, and so on, and running challenges everyone could participate in. So what if you have to recalibrate what a class period looks like? You were starting over anyway. Do something new." Joshua E. replied, "You missed that the goal wasn't to improve students' experience or life, but test scores and punctuality." Our next story is, not my lot, not my problem. This happened decades ago for a food production company where I was a quality control manager. I regularly checked the quality of the food we produced and the food production lines for 4 plants in the area. One plant I inspected was operating within tolerance and received a generally good report, but I had to note one potential hazard. The parking lot was in terrible condition, and the dust that employee vehicles kicked up as they entered and left work could enter the plant and contaminate the food production line. I gave a copy of my report to the plant operations supervisor and suggested he get it taken care of before the USDA inspector noticed it. His response: "You were here to inspect food production, not the parking lot. I'm here to ensure the quality of the food product that leaves this plant." Bull crap. And then he said the words every malicious complier thrives on: "Don't tell me how to run my plant." 6 weeks later, the USDA inspector shut down the plant, citing the quality of the parking lot and the heightened risk of dust entering the food production line. Who knew? But even then, there was a workaround that could have kept the plant open. Only plant operations had demanded that I don't tell them how to run their plant. Even so, I had to ask. The following month, after the lot had been repaved and the inspector had finally approved the plant to be reopened, "Why didn't you just close down the parking lot and have the employees park on the street? Schedule the repave on a weekend. The plant could have stayed in operation." He didn't lose his job. In fact, he retired from that company. So I guess it was a lesson learned, but he didn't talk to me again. Yeah, humble pie tastes delicious. A quiet retirement was probably his only option at that point. Jack's SSO replied, "It's amazing how the human ego and a little insecurity can block even the simplest common sense. Nowadays, a non-compliance that ignorant that shuts down operations for multiple shifts would very likely result in management termination. Unless that management happens to be family and a family business, then it's probably a transfer." Our next story is, "Won't let me work from home while I'm contagious?" Bet. I'm the type of person who doesn't get a lot of symptoms when sick. A scratchy throat, a runny nose, but nothing that really knocks me out of commission. However, I try to remain aware that anyone else my contagious self infects might not be so fortunate. So one morning I wake up feeling off and text my boss that I'm going to urgent care and will let him know what they say. I get strep throat a lot and had it again, so they gave me antibiotics and send me on my way. Call my boss and ask him if I can work from home. 100% of my job can be done from home. "No," he says, "you either need to take a sick day or come in." So I tell him, "Okay, see you shortly." Now, my boss is the type of person who doesn't really listen. He hears what he wants to hear, and most everything else goes in one ear and out the other. I pull into the parking lot, put a mask on, and head straight to his office. When I barge in, he's in the middle of a video call, so my one colleague overhears all this and has to keep from laughing. Boss says, "Oh, they gave you a clean bill of health?" I say, "Nope, like I told you on the phone. I feel decent enough, but am sick and contagious." I reached into my pocket to pull out a pill bottle. Gotta be on these antibiotics for at least a day before I'm not. I even coughed a bit for dramatic effect as I stood there, breathing his air. "Oh," he says, the color beginning to drain from his face. "Well, why don't you, go ahead and work from home today?" "I'll do that, boss." Funny how that's fine now that he's at risk. Yeah, classic case. As long as it's not affecting you, it's not an issue. But the second that you're confronted with the issue and it affects your quality of life, yeah, let's start making some changes. Tremenda Karucha commented, "At least you didn't have to risk spreading germs in the office. Though I'd say your boss's sudden change of heart was a bit of a dramatic rewrite of his own policies. Here's hoping your antibiotics work faster than his decision-making skills." Our next story is accidentally destroying important manager documents because they forced me in to give my doctor's note, despite being sick. First, I'm German and English is not my native language, so I apologize for any mistakes I may do. A little bit of background. Due to horrible teachers and my easily intimidated personality, I developed the fear of making mistakes, since I was getting yelled at constantly for making some. Now, my body tried to avoid school and the stress that comes with it by developing the habit of vomiting, to prove my mother I was sick so I could stay home. Problem was, my body tries it a lot when I get stressed out. Now I can suppress that habit to a certain degree, if I focus on my breathing and close my eyes. But sooner or later, I have to leave the stress-causing situation or I vomit. Now, a little bit of German background, since I don't know if this concept exists in other countries. We call it Zeitarbeit, and Google translated it to temporary employment. But long story short, it just means that you don't apply at the company you want to work for. You apply for the Zeitarbeit company, ZC, who then finds jobs for you. You go to the ZC, give any important information they need to find you a job you don't really hate, and if they find something, they call you and you have an interview with the new company you may work for. Then, if you agree to work there, you're a temporary employee for 6 months. After the 6 months, they either let you go if the company believes it doesn't work out, or you get hired and now have a full job. In theory, it sounds awesome. In practicality, the companies spare money if they let go of the temporary employee and circle to new ones. So your chance of staying is barely non-existent. Not to mention, in the 6th month, they don't need a reason to let you go, other than to say it doesn't work out. Now to the story. The first 2 jobs I go through ZC. I try hard to impress them. Doing overtime, work, more outside my job description. Always being on time and never being sick. I ignored my mental problems and drowned them at home to endure everything. However, I wouldn't be here if I got hired. This story takes place in 2018. My 4th job, a factory where I have to pack and sort stuff. However, now I was far less enthusiastic. No overtime, keeping to my job description, but was still always on time and stayed my 40 hours a week. However, the manager demanded overtime nearly daily. I wasn't going to do it, not for minimum wage, and she didn't like it, but I was doing my job, so I believe she kept me in for the full 6 months before they let me go. But then I made an absolutely fatal mistake by daring to get sick. I got a cyst very close to my private area, and I could barely walk, stand, or even sit. Laying was uncomfortable, but at least not painful. I went to the doctor, got antibiotics and a doctor's note for 7 days. 5 for the antibiotics, and 2 to see if it helped enough. I called in my job to state I was sick for a week, but my manager demanded I give it to her in person, or she would let me go then and there. Now I was annoyed, tired, and in pain that I have to go in, since I was just in my 2nd month working there, so I accepted and my parents drove me in. I waddled like an X-leg penguin through the factory into her office. She didn't see me walk since she was writing something. I put the doctor's notice on her desk, close to some other documents. She looked up at me and started talking. A lot. Now, you can imagine that condescending Karen tone in her voice. She started lecturing me about how she dislikes I don't do overtime, and now that I'm lazy and went to a doctor to get a week of paid vacation, that I need to work on my working morale, and that my chances of getting hired are very slim, and I need to put in 110% if I want to have a chance. Now, my pain around my private area started worsening due to me standing, so I barely listened to her after that. But I noticed her voice got louder and louder, and she, somehow, talked herself into rage, nearly yelling at this point, and I felt my stomach start turning. I started my strategies to keep my stomach calm since I knew. It would be maybe a few minutes of her complaining before before I can leave. I tried to cut in to explain that I need to go home to rest, but she had none of it and interrupted me, telling me how disrespectful it is to interrupt someone. The irony. Cue my malicious compliance. I stopped calming down my stomach and let it does what it wants to do, and surprise, surprise, not even after a minute, everything comes out, hitting her desk and covers some of her documents and half my doctor's note. Her face was absolutely priceless, though I wish I could have enjoyed it more. Next to my pain and new taste, after her initial shock and silence, she finally sent me home to rest. I still think about it till today. After the week, I came back rather healthy and I got pulled into her office, where she and another boss/manager waited for me. After a few words back and forth, they asked me why I didn't even try to turn around as I vomited, since I apparently damaged and destroyed some important documents. And even though I was not obligated to it, I explained the cyst I had, that I couldn't even walk, stand, or turn around without a lot of pain, let alone going to the next classroom or trash bin. After that, I shouldn't have even been there in the first place, since a doctor's note can be handed over after I came back. The other manager/boss looked super pissy at my manager. After more important back and forth, I returned back to work. I still got let go after the 6 months, but I wasn't sorry about this job. I then decided to start focusing on my mental health and my addiction problem. For the last bit of fact, the manager was gone quickly after me, and the factory was destroyed at the end of 2024. According to some of my old colleagues, they were constantly firing and hiring, and more people were quitting on their own. Look, I'll just say this. If I had the ability to vomit on command, I would absolutely use it for these same malicious compliance purposes. I mean, why wouldn't you? If you've got a curse, turn it into a gift. Lumi1992 replied, "Perfect. You should have tried to hit her in the face like one of those faucets or a vomit flamethrower. Most people cannot direct the vomit. You should have used the gift. Oh, and for the first, do not explain yourself. Say you were sick, and she explicitly told you to come in or you'd be fired. The rest is on the manager to explain. Gladly, this is Germany and not the USA, so you have rights, even as a temp. They do not have the right to know your illness. Stay safe, and I hope you got a better job by now. It can happen to get a permanent job as a temp. I know it's rare. Keep on applying in the meantime. Anyone who knows the system knows that you're a good worker if they keep you the 6 months several times in a row." And OP replied to this, "Thanks for your kind words. I'm still jobless since it appears the more that I try to fix my mental health problems, the more bursts the box of Pandora open. More and more crap came to light, which I drowned in order to function. But I'm not giving up, not with my gift, as you call it." Our next story is, "Don't assume I'm a crook. This happened a few years back when I was in between jobs. A mini recession was underway, and I wanted a who cares job in a high-energy environment. I ended up managing a food stand at the local NHL hockey arena. In the stand, there was myself, stand lead, one head cashier, a cook, a runner, and a number of cashiers. This company started from the position that all their employees were crooks. Sorry to be so blunt, but that was their reality. It was not an unfounded position. Refilling beer cups and pocketing the cash from the sale was not a rare practice. I had 2 of my cashiers fired after secret shoppers caught them. The trick was to do this with non-inventory items. At the start and end of a night, I counted everything. Beer cups, the cardboard triangles on which pizza was served, popcorn bags, bags of potato chips, etc. Bulk items could not be counted. Popcorn, draft beer, nacho chips, etc. At the end of the night, we garbaged the bulk items that cannot be carried over to the next night. Cooked hot dogs, pizza slices, popcorn, etc. We may have wolfed down a few items. We're closed. I'm going to toss these leftover slices in the bin. Anyone want one? I recorded the waste, 3 slices, but they may not have all made it into the garbage. Apparently, some suit envisioned that stands might be loading up with extra food from the delivery folks, or cooking extra hot dogs. Manglement got their panties in a twist about us eating the garbage, and sent a memo that all waste was to be boxed up and carried down to the warehouse. So we did as told. After counting the waste, into the box went a random assortment of pizza slices, hot dogs, and popcorn. It wasn't put in neatly. There was always lots of popcorn. Manglement probably didn't care about the popcorn, but the directive was vague, so they got it anyway. The box was stuffed with popcorn. If the warehouse ever did anything with what was in that box, it would be a fermenting, fly-infested mess by the time they got around to opening the boxes. At the after-work beer party, the directive was discussed. None of the stand leads liked the assumptions made regarding our integrity, and they adopted the practice. A month or two later, I had reason to chat with the warehouse on another topic, and I asked them what they did with all the food waste that was brought down. Answer: we toss it right into the dumpster. We're not digging through that mess. You never go in and count anything? Nah, the suits tried to make us, but we refused. We already have full-time jobs, and they wouldn't hire anyone whose job description was to dig through garbage. It's just the suits trying to intimidate you stand leads. I resumed binning my waste and not lugging anything down to the warehouse. Nobody noticed. I passed the word. Neither we nor the warehouse told management. The empty suits never noticed. Responsible Chess 26 replied to this. This kind of stuff always ticked me off. A girlfriend from years ago worked at various coffee, donut, and bagel places, and at the end of the night would throw everything into a trash bag, then pour the leftover coffee all over it to ruin it so no one could trash pick the perfectly good food that was now ruined. Of course, you could still get away with pocketing bags and bags of leftover food on occasion if you were there at closing and they offered the 10-for-1 deals. Wink, wink. Okay, everybody, that is all the time we got for today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and comment down below, and if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. I got nothing else for you. Get out of here. I will see you all next time.